Hello, 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 and welcome to Two Girls in a Pod. I am Sharon.
I'm Christy.
As always, we hope everybody is doing well and adjusting to daylight savings time.
Woo.
Don't you just love a more sunshine in the evening?
I love the long days.
So do I. I just let's just stay on this.
I know. I wish we could.
I know. I guess we voted it, but there's some other little thing that has to happen. It's crazy, but okay, whatever. And I don't think we pay enough attention to, when somebody is being overtly mean to us or all this overt stuff, we can identify that really quickly and we can say, oh, that's a mean person, or this person's trying to hurt me, on and on and on. But that's not the real issue that most people have. It is what we've talked about, is subtle toxicity.
Yeah. How it creeps in.
And, it's there and we don't even know it, and why it's so hard for us to identify it. And I think sometimes it's because we have really worked in this society of shutting down our intuition.
For sure.
That little voice that tells us, ooh, no, this doesn't feel right. Oh, you're making that up in your head. Or the person who's doing it to you convinces you that you're making it up in your head.
Mm-hmm.
It's gaining from these things.
Yeah. And I think that that's what makes it extra toxic, is because it infiltrates and gets in your mind and plays out without you even having a conscious awareness to it.
100%. In that subtlety, and we've all experienced it. We all have. We may not be able to identify it or to know it, but we have. And maybe after you listen to this podcast, which we hope you do, you might sit there and say, oh my God, that's what that relationship was. And it's in all kinds of relationships. It's not just in intimate relationships or family or friends. It can be in coworkers. It can be anywhere that we see this.
Mm-hmm. It can be within the work that you do between management and employees. And yeah.
It's really interesting because sometimes it's the way in which you say it, it made me think of Fluffy when his house was broken into, and the way the guy was talking to him about crime and all of this and all of that. Pretty soon you get more afraid and you do these things. And he said he walked out with more weapons than he's ever had. And he's like, what am I going to do with all these? But it's not till after the fact that he realized he'd been duped a little bit.
Mm-hmm. The salesperson was playing on his vulnerabilities.
And that's what that subtle toxicity is.
Yeah.
People who do it find your vulnerability. That's why it's important to pay attention. They find that vulnerability. And you don't know that vulnerability sometimes, because sometimes when you're presenting information or whatever, you're not thinking about that. But those people who are listening are doing that. Mm-hmm. All of these scams that you see, people are infiltrating, going based on, oh, well, they're following, oh, well, she follows this. Animals are really important to her. So I'm going to go in and talk about how animals are mistreated and things like that. And how, if you don't help, do you really care about animals? If you're not willing to give that $10, everything you say, is it really true? And then pretty soon the person's like, oh my God, if I really did care about animals, they're right. I really would give that $10.
I don't want to be a hypocrite.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's that subtlety that people use.
Yeah.
As a forms of manipulation. And I get it, in the advertising industry, that's what it does. When it's scammers, it's exactly what it's called. It's a scam.
Mm-hmm.
But oftentimes we are scammed even in our personal lives.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
It's that thing of, how do I identify when there is that toxicity? How do I pay attention to that internal peace that I have?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because once you're able to identify it, you can take some of the power out of that, take your power back.
And we're talking about this external stuff, but we have a lot of subtle toxicity, and we have actually more subtle toxicity internally.
And I think that happens a lot of times too, just because of all this information that comes in, those subtle toxicities outside of us, we allow them to feed that toxicity within us. That self-dialogue, we talk about that all the time. that internal dialogue that we have, we get down on ourselves. And I think a lot of times it is, we're judging ourselves because of these little things that we let infiltrate and we don't even realize it.
And then we start making that our internal narrative and not understanding, oh, well, Christy did a little bit better on sales this time. I know you have the potential. Maybe you're just not pushing as hard, or is this company really important? It really is important to Christy. And you think, oh, they're giving me a motivational speech. But what it does then is the person, oh man, maybe I'm not a good employee.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not working as hard as Christy. She's working 70 hours and I'm only working 65. Oh my goodness. Do you see what I mean?
But you can definitely see the secondary gain to the employer by doing that. If I am making you feel like you're not enough in this position, then I'm going to have you put in more hours. I'm going to get more out of you.
I always tell people the important thing to always look at is the secondary gain.
Yeah.
Who's gaining from this? And, when we're talking about subtle toxicity, we see this a lot in domestic violence.
Mm-hmm.
That person, when you meet them, checks all the boxes. They say everything and do everything. But you might have this internal thing saying, they're saying all the right stuff, but I'm not feeling it right. And then what you do is, oh, you're just being judgmental. Oh, you always do that when there's some nice person. All this stuff that you've been told, you start regurgitating to yourself. And then it's like, oh, well, you just need to give them a chance. And then slowly it's, well, you're not very smart, are you?
Mm-hmm.
Little comments like that.
And especially because at first they make it syrupy sweet, go back and forth, they may make these little subtle comments, but then go right back to being nice and everything. And so it does make you doubt your intuition when you feel those little incongruencies.
Mm-hmm. I've seen it for years when I worked with women in domestic violence and some men. It's that subtlety. And there's that subtlety we use with children as well. And we don't realize it. And it's toxic. And we think sometimes we're giving that pep talk. But, in essence, sometimes the parent might feel like, oh my God, stop misbehaving. You're making me look bad.
Mm-hmm.
Why can't you just be a good kid like your sister or brother? Oh, now I'm not good.
Mm-hmm.
They don't address behaviors. And so it's everywhere.
Yeah.
It is everywhere.
That's exactly what they promote, in essence, really, is that it creates this self-doubt of your worth.
Yes. And that toxicity that's exactly what it is. If I doubt myself, then guess what? More and more people get to take advantage of me.
Yeah.
I start giving and giving and giving in order to try to become the thing that everybody wants, which I can't be anyway. But the secondary gain is, what is the other person getting off of me being this way? That's the biggest thing that we have to ask ourselves. What is it?
Usually that they get to manipulate you.
Yes.
Yeah.
We say, well, is the person aware of what they're doing? Maybe, maybe not.
Yeah.
But I feel like if you are doing something and then you have a behavior and somebody says, I don't like it, please stop doing that, and you continue to manipulate to do it, yeah, you're very aware of what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And when we see this in business, and right now it is so hard because companies do not have loyal employees like they used to, because companies are not loyal to the employee.
Mm-hmm.
And so what is happening, and I hear this all the time, maybe I'm not the good employee, or maybe I should be working more, or they really want me to do this. And, John, he does this and he gets all these bonuses. And then I ask my client and says, well, what is John missing out on? And she goes, oh, he was kind of upset because he didn't get to see his son's soccer games or anything because he's working Saturdays.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what they wanted. And he became the model thing.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing, I worked at a company, and what happened is you would go into our break room and they would have on the board a list of productivity. So who was the most productive?
Right.
Okay. That's subtle toxicity as well, because what does it do? It then creates a division within your peers. And people would go in and somebody told me about it. I said, and they're like, what are you talking about? I don't pay attention to that crap. So I went in and sure enough, there's my name on the list.
Yeah.
And maybe I'm a little bit of an overachiever. No, I was then. I'm not. No, but I had high productivity, but partly due to the fact that I got somebody else's caseload when I went in because they lost other clinicians. So a full caseload came to me. So there were other circumstances around what made that. And also the fact that I really work on my relationship with making sure people come in, all those kind of things.
Mm-hmm.
So there were 3 of us that switched that top 3 position. But then you could start hearing, well, I only work 2 days a week. How can I have that kind of productivity? How unfair is this? Do you see what I mean? It starts this.
Yeah, you can see that it creates that in the employees, and it doesn't even make any sense really, because if you look at it, the company is manipulating the numbers anyway because of how many hours this person's working versus this one or that. So, I mean, if you changed all of that, it's going to look different.
It'll change the variables. You're correct. There's a manipulation in it, and they know that. And they're trying to get the other employees to work like the top employees. But what they're really doing is just creating dissension within the ranks.
Yeah.
And I've been at companies where they do this, this hierarchy that is insanity.
And you have seen companies, I think, move to this even more, because it used to be very, very different, that the employer and the employee, it was a working relationship in a different way, and there was a respect for one another in a different way.
Absolutely. And it wasn't about manipulation. You really were. We were talking to somebody and they said, well, I never had to ask for a raise. My employer just gave it to me because I was doing a good job. Yeah, well, those days are gone.
Yeah.
But once again, it's this subtle toxicity, even within the workplace. You see these people doing this mad exodus from these companies because they're feeling that thing of, I'm never enough. Nothing I do is ever enough for this employee. I love this too. And when this all changed, I don't get. We used to have like a 30-day or 90-day probationary period. And then, now we moved it to 2 years. So now we can get rid of those people. It's the same thing. It's a subtle toxicity. It's saying, well, we're going to use you for 2 years and you better do really, really well. But even if you do really, really well, we can still get rid of you. We have people who are anxious about their jobs so much now.
Yeah.
And we're wondering why. It's because of that toxicity that is taking place in work environments anymore. And understand when I make this statement, it's not political in that way, but we have a lot of subtle toxicity in our government. And what I mean by that is, well, Christy, we want to pass this bill because it's really, really important to you. And you're sitting there, well, you know what? That is important to me. But what they're not telling you about is everything else in the bill that's not important to you and may even be detrimental to you on the backside or to your family members and friends or whatever. Those are subtle toxicities.
Yeah.
When we're talking about that, there is a conscious or subconscious need to leave out relevant information in order to get what I want in the end.
Exactly. And they know exactly what to amplify to draw your attention to, so that you're not seeing all the other stuff that's going to happen if this is put into place.
And how many times when people end relationships and they get to take that step back and they'll say, oh my God. And all of these little things that I didn't even realize was happening in this relationship, that I feel like I'm not worthy. I feel like I'm stupid. I feel like nobody's going to love me. That's the best thing. Well, who do you think's going to love you if I don't? Who do you think's going to put up with your crazy if I don't? It can come off as, I'm here for you. But it's not like, I'm here for you, babe. No matter if you do, you are crazy. No, It's not that. Who's going to love you if I don't with your crazy?
Yeah.
I hear shit like that all the time. That is that subtle toxicity.
And the healthier you get and the more you're able to identify that, you're going to become even more aware of even that kind of statement. Doesn't sound so subtle to me, but it probably does for people in those relationships.
Well, yeah, because it almost sounds like it's kind of one of those things that who's going to love you if I don't?
Yeah. Well,
Like,
and
so it's like this, it's this convoluted statement that, oh, they love me and nobody else will. And it's like, it really messes with your head.
yeah.
And that's why it's important for people to realize and to pay attention.
Right.
Paying attention is the most important thing. What is some statement making me feel? Even if it's done nicely. We have got to get people back to paying attention to their intuition and not to all the bullshit.
Hmm. We were also talking about how that people often use humor, and it's a subtle toxicity when you are even using it in jest. It seems like criticism of your own body or those kinds of things. It doesn't matter what it's specifically about, but a lot of times you'll hear that, like people will basically ridicule themselves about their weight or something like that and use it in humor.
Another one is, oh yeah, sometimes I'm just so bipolar. What you've heard is you're moody and you need to control that. So at some point, somebody has told you, oh yeah, you're so bipolar, or oh, you're so ADHD. What they're really saying is pay attention. But then you start using that, and then that becomes almost this thing that you're using on a daily. Oh, I can't keep track of things because I'm so ADHD. No, you can't keep track of things because you haven't slowed down. There's a lot of things to it.
It becomes a rehearsed narrative that you implement all the time and start to believe about yourself. And the more that you rehearse it, the more that you believe it, the more that you follow the pattern of behavior that matches it.
100%. And then what happens is when we have that subtle toxicity, we start to reinforce it. The more we reinforce it, the harder it is to get out of situations where I have reinforced it and I now think that I am the problem.
Mm-hmm.
And how many times I'll even hear when I'm doing counseling with families or couples, well, if he would just behave, or if she would just let me do what I need to do, or things like that, that puts the burden on the other person.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds logical until you realize what is the secondary gain. Little kids, I love it when they say, well, you just don't love me, to their parents. It's not subtle, but for an adult to sit there and think, oh my God, my kid doesn't love it. Well, of course the kid loves you. Or why are you so mean? Why aren't you nice like Christy's mom? Or do you see me? Or so-and-so's mom is really nice, and it's that subtle thing. And then that parent, well, why am I not? It's little things. And the more it's done, you're right, the more it becomes solidified.
Yes. You begin to question yourself, doubt yourself.
And it's happening way too much. That's why we have an increase in anxiety, and, we have an increase in mental health. A lot of it is the subtle toxicity, believe it or not. Mm-hmm. It's that narrative that you've taken on as your truth, that you've rehearsed, that somebody else started. And so you continued to build on that foundation until you can't take it anymore. And then you get to come and see me.
Yeah. I mean, the more that you hear it, the more that you start to embrace it for yourself, then that's what plays out in your life.
When I'm working with people, I'll always ask if they come in, it's a relationship issue or a work issue. I'll say, who's benefiting from you being in this state right now? Mm. They'll be there like, well, what do you mean? Who's benefiting? If you're overly stressed and now you're sitting, and I have a lot of that this recently. I'm always stressed. I'm always thinking, look, I'm here in therapy. Look, they're still contacting me, even though they know I'm in an appointment. They don't care. There's no boundaries anymore. Calling people in the weekends, doing all in this and that other stuff. And then he's there like, but if I set a boundary, he goes, they kind of have threatened like they'll fire me. And they know you need a job. Mm-hmm. But it started out that subtle thing. And now once it gets past that place and they have you where they want you, then it's no longer subtle. Mm-hmm. You see that in domestic violence. It starts with the talk. It starts with bringing you down to where you don't have any self-worth. And once you don't have any self-worth, then I can beat the shit out of you and you're going to feel like you deserve it.
Yeah.
They teach this mentality of somehow you deserve it.
Mm-hmm. And the more that you allow it to infiltrate you in that way, by the time it's overt, you're in a pretty miserable spot. That's why I think it's so important to be able to identify these things early on and understand that your worth is not based on these things.
Mm-hmm. Another place that we have this, and once again, this isn't a political statement, but this fake news thing. So now I have a lot of people telling me, Sharon, I don't know what's truth anymore. They're starting to question themselves. And I said, if you want to know truth, I said, you go research it. You go look at different across the board.
Multiple sources.
Yes.
Multiple points of view.
Yes. And it can be on anything. Or somebody uses the term, well, this is the way it is. And you're thinking, well, no, doesn't feel right. I tell people, take the time. If it's something that's important to you, go research it.
Yeah.
But I told you, I can't keep researching shit for people. Takes up too much of my time. I love research because I have some background with research and I love it. I love knowing where a study comes from, all of that. But we have that in all of these studies that you see.
Well, I think that that's part of the problem that people have too. They think that they're looking at multiple different sources but looking at where the sources come from, I know that that's a really important piece of it. I mean, when you're researching different things, I know that you look at who's funding these articles, these studies.
I always tell people, I always love it, because we study that in ecology and sociology is who are you comparing yourself to? Worst thing you do is compare yourself.
Right. As soon as you do,
you've elevated the competition.
Yeah, you've elevated the competition and you feel somehow inept.
So that's what it is. Whenever I'm doing research, you're right. I go back and I look who's funding. Well, and you'll see stuff like vegan cheese. It's not good for you using all that. And then you find out that it's the dairy industry or the cheese industry that funded the study.
Right.
I tell people you have to go look at independent studies because the funding, the independent study, and even with every study, you have to be able to go back and reproduce that study, and you should be able to reproduce it with the same results.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, you have to be able to identify when somebody is skewing the
information.
Yeah.
And the same thing is when anybody's talking to you, it's the same thing. Why are they skewing the information? Mm-hmm. What does the skewing of that information mean? Okay. If you think something's fake or skewed or whatever you want to call it, and if it's important to you, you need to take the time to go and really look at it.
Research the source.
Yes. When you go to research something, you have to look at both sides.
Yeah.
You have to be able to look at both sides.
Yeah. Don't just read the article that appeals to you.
But that's what we do. But that's a subtle toxicity, because what happens is it's if I'm sitting there and I tell you, I've convinced you that this is the best vehicle. And every time you turn around, it's breaking down. But then I'll say, but I can't get any breakdown. Well, here, let me show you this article. Okay. And I'll send you all the information that feeds what I need you to have. That's subtle toxicity. Yeah. Because we, oh, well, that looks legit, man. Yeah. Mm-hmm. That must be them. It must be me. Maybe I just don't know how to drive, or maybe I don't, you start having that same kind of mentality. Mm-hmm. We need to learn to stop it because it is damaging to people. It is damaging to their psyche, to all different arenas in their life. It's kind of like, once again, what people's opinion is or what, that's not what we're talking about here. We're simply presenting things. Oftentimes, even in the LGBTQ plus community, they're told, well, you can't be Christian. And so they'll start questioning that, even though they can live a life or whatever, or you can't be parents, or it doesn't matter what it is. It can be any group. It doesn't matter. In any group, there's going to be subtle toxicity against that group.
Right.
I remember growing up, it was like they didn't talk to the Latinos, the Hispanics, about going to college and stuff. And so you'll do really good washing dishes or something. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you start thinking, well, I don't know, can I do that? Do you see what I mean? Even though it's little things. Fast forward, we've come from that place where, we do have more of those opportunities and stuff.
I think that that's a huge place that you see subtle toxicities is a lot of times people doubt themselves because they don't feel smart enough. And I think because there's so many comparisons that happen, especially in school.
And I don't think oftentimes when teachers are saying things, I don't think they're saying it. They don't realize sometimes they think they're providing inspiration or motivation. But when you sit there and you say, Christy, your sister is a straight A student.
Mhm.
And here Christy is with the C and a D. Okay, well, what does that mean? She talks tone.
Mhm.
With this little boy I worked with, it was the teacher's tone.
Right.
It was his tone that told him the teacher did not like him. And when he went to an adult, the adult said, oh, that's not true. You're just misunderstanding, blah, 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 blah. Came to me and told me, and I says, well, why would you say that? He did. He identified that the teacher used different tone with the other students. When she talked with him or to him, it was the tone. So his little gut's telling him, this teacher doesn't like me.
Yeah.
He didn't get called on. He didn't get the really fun things they would set up and do little fun activities. That wasn't him.
Mm.
And so he asked me. So I went and talked to the teacher and did a roundabout. And sure enough, he misbehaved. So she didn't want to deal with him. So it disrupted her apple cart.
Mhm.
So we worked on that. But those are the things we're talking about.
Right.
We give these subtle messages and we don't understand the impact that they can have on people.
Right.
We should be paying attention to how something is making us feel, and we should be giving more credibility to that versus what somebody is saying to us.
Right.
And often when we see this is the incongruency between what somebody says and their behavior.
Exactly. I mean, actions will speak louder than words every time.
And we will see that, oh, I love you, I love you, I love you. Why do you have to be so stupid? Those kind of things. How is that love? I don't understand.
Right.
But, for whatever reason, people feel like, oh, well, this is how I've always been treated, so it must be me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's not okay to belittle someone else thinking that you're pointing out something in constructive criticism.
And that's why I recommend to people the importance of getting on different, whether it's podcast. I participate in Noom Vibe now, and it's a community where it really is about helping. It doesn't have that toxicity to it. It really is about sharing stories and people uplifting and being and paying attention. You have podcasts. There are so many self-help books out there.
Mm-hmm.
There are resources for us now that are at our fingertips if we just choose to use them.
Yeah.
And I think part of the problem that we have is that we have to start to value ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to shut down that negativity.
Yeah. And do the research and figure things out for ourselves and start to build that trust in our intuition again.
And understand, people, when your words are not matching your behavior, what eventually happens is people will gravitate towards the behavior after a while because our behavior is more of a true statement than our words.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So even with you, if you feel like you're going into work and you're griping and complaining every day and you go in with the bad attitude, guess what? You are bringing a toxic thing into that environment as well. You become an active participant in it.
And it becomes even more of a self-fulfilling prophecy because you have put yourself in that energy and that opens you up to receive that same kind of energy.
Exactly. And oftentimes I'm asked when my clients are in these toxic environments, how do I do that without letting it be toxic to me? I said, you put up your boundaries. You go in there and you realize I'm here to do a job. My job is not my life. I'm here. I will do what is required of me. It's not about having these friendships and stuff because sometimes that becomes manipulative.
Exactly. And it's not that you can stop the people from trying to manipulate and get what they want, but you assign how much relevance that has.
Exactly. And you identify it with, if I'm going home every day and I am physically and emotionally exhausted from my job, unless it's a high stress job, that's a little bit different. But if I'm working all of those hours and I have nothing to give to myself or to the people that I love and care about, you're not setting boundaries.
Mm-mm.
And people will say, well, in today's environment, and you're right. And this is where it's scary. In today's environment, if you sit there and say, I'm required to work 40 hours, oh, good, you're replaceable. Go, because we will get the person who is better at this.
Mm-hmm.
Subtle toxicity is in our military when somebody is being med boarded out, they start to feel, oh, well, they red flag and they do all these things. So yeah, you can't go out in the field and you can't just sit in the desk.
Mm.
They've lost their value.
Right.
So when veterans come out, they don't know their value because they've been told and conditioned, my value is serving this country. And now I'm out here, and sometimes they're not being treated like it was valuable, even out here sometimes with some of the stuff that goes on. So it starts to reinforce those things. And once again, it's policy, it's all of that. I get it. But how do we shift our thinking in those things that we cannot control? We don't control policy.
Mm-hmm.
You can march, you can do all this stuff, and things change 100%. Then you become an active participant in it.
Yeah.
The same thing in your relationships.
But when you are able to identify and see that that's how the rules of engagement are for them, there's a lot of power in that, and being able to say that that does not mean that I assign myself those same inaccurate statements that they're saying. I don't have to say that about myself.
100%. And I think that's where it starts when we stop using somebody else's narrative to define me.
Yes.
And that is huge. Stop using somebody else's narrative to define who you are.
Exactly.
You become your own person writing your own narrative. That's how you take back your power and you stop the subtle toxicity.
Right.
When you are in a place, when you start hearing negative stuff, no, we don't talk like that in here. If I'm in my office, and it depends on what it is, you can talk and do whatever you want. But if you're going to do something that is going to be harmful to somebody else, then I will address that. I will address, do you understand this is harmful? And sometimes they don't. They'll say, well, what do you mean? When you say this, do you see this as the natural response to it? Well, no, that's not what I mean. Well, then let's talk about what you mean.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Or when they're in my office and they're doing that negative internal dialogue. Well, I'm just not smart and I'm not good. And I'm not, okay, wait, no, not true. Where did that come from?
Yeah.
What is the narrative you want? Well, I think I'm smart. Okay, well, then let's start having that narrative.
Mm-hmm.
But it is that you have to, and you're always big on this one, consistency and practice.
Yes, because it's like building a muscle.
Exactly.
It takes time and repetition.
And trust me, people, you are worth it. You are worth it. You deserve to be the best version of you.
Yeah.
And in order to start being the best version of you, you have got to start identifying that subtle toxicity that is internal and external.
Yes.
And you can't just keep looking at the external, because I promise you that external has now become an internal dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
And if that is the case, then you have to start to identify, what do I do different? How do I stop that? We were reading a book and he talks about whenever there's that negative stuff, what do you do?
I don't remember.
What is the symbol he does? If you start,
oh yeah, you start complaining or judging, just take your finger, slide it across your throat, because you're cutting off the good from you when you've become so focused on that.
You understand? You're damaging yourself
Mhm.
in order to keep that narrative going.
Yes.
So take the time to sit, identify, and understand. If something's happening that you do not like, ask yourself, what is it I want instead? Don't sit there and say, well, I don't want to be abused anymore. No, I want to be empowered.
Yeah.
I don't want to work till I have no energy. I want to set boundaries at work so I have energy.
Mhm.
Do you understand? You cannot do this in a negative because you're already in a place of negative, and our brain hears negative in a different way and those messages in a different way. Okay. So those are the things that you can do. Those are the things that you can practice,
Mhm.
and you practice them consistently. And then the other thing you do is you learn if you are in those toxic relationships or that subtle toxicity that you're feeling, stop discounting yourself.
Yeah.
Stop it. If you're feeling it, there's probably, and somebody, oh, that's just your crazy brain.
Mhm.
No, it is not my crazy brain.
It's another message to make you feel like you cannot trust your own intuition.
Yes. And if you can't trust your own intuition, guess what? That means you have to give that trust to somebody else who may not have your best interest.
Yes.
So in order to stop some of this, once again, you slow everything down. That's why we're big on meditation and mindfulness. It is in that place that you can start implementing new ideas, new ways of thinking.
It's so funny because it seems so ironic because people think that we have to be so focused on solutions and our mind is constantly going and trying to figure things out and rectify a situation or make it this or that. But it's when we sit in that stillness and stop all the incessant thinking that we create the space for other solutions to come into focus.
Exactly. And also for clarity.
Yeah.
Is this really what's going on in my relationship, or is it me?
Mhm.
Or is this a relationship I can't be in anymore, or whatever it is?
Right.
But we have to start taking care of ourselves first so that we can then, if I heal myself, then I am a participant in healing the nation, healing other things, healing our earth, whatever it is that your causes are.
Yeah.
Then you become that active participant.
Yes.
So meditation, mindfulness, paying attention, stop minimizing your intuition, really pay attention. Start listening to podcasts like ours and others, reading books.
Yes. Reading books is huge for me. I feel like
You
that
know,
helps me
in
so much.
YouTube, TikTok, all that can be good, but check on the credentialing of people. What is their story? Remember, this is important. We get taken advantage on social media and platforms because we are listening to people who sometimes we find out are not, they're doing their own stuff and it's about this at the back end. So being aware of those things, but start being proactive in your life
Yes.
so we can stop the subtle toxicity before it becomes overt
Yes.
and in our face.
Mm.
As always, you can find us on
twogirlsinapod.com and you can subscribe. And anytime that we post a new episode, you'll receive an email. You can also find us on social media or anywhere you listen to your podcasts. We are on Facebook and Instagram, and we would appreciate any likes, follows, or feedback that you'd like to give.
We're also on YouTube, and that is Adventures of Two Girls in a Pod. And on there you'll find our podcast, but you'll also find we take trips and do stuff like that, and we share that, and I do mixology on it, sip and savor. So just a little montage of stuff because that's about the adventures of life and things like that. So it's a little bit different.
Yes, and then you can also find the Grateful Beginnings coloring books on Amazon. Just type in Christy Banta and Sharon Abeda, or one or the other. You can pull it up that way, and you'll see there's a series of 10 coloring books. It's about starting a conversation with children about gratitude and how it benefits our life.
And guess what? If you're in a place of gratitude, you're not going to be in a place of toxicity.
Yeah.
They don't live in the same space.
Right.
So, you know what? As always, we appreciate you. We're very grateful for you. And we're grateful for everybody who supports us, follows us. And if you are listening to us, tell your friends, tell your family. Get more people listening and involved with this. We would greatly appreciate it.
Yes.
And we will be back next week. And so we hope that all of you guys have a fabulous weekend. And remember, take charge.
Be proactive.
Be proactive on who you are and what you need. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.